Okay, thank you. I want to thank Anita for being here. And well, she's going to present the paper. I'm the co-author. I'm very proud of her and the work she's done. And we are aiming to send it to the highest ranked journal in the program, Journal of Business Mentoring. And we hope to have luck in this process. Anita is a very young professor, and she is just very recently appointed to associate professor, being so young even. But she has already published some papers in highly ranked journals. JB being one of them, Journal of Business Mentoring, which is, as I said, the top in entrepreneurial finance. And she also has published in Service Economics, and she is about to publish in other highly ranked journals. The only hint that is missing, but she's on track, is entrepreneurship theory and practice, but it will be soon hit as well. And so she comes from Milan. She's been working there at Polytechnico in Milano, belonging to the team of Massimo Colombo, and now she's in Lyon. With also a colleague from Milan, Paolo Bertoni, which is also an author, and we give very frequently. And so I think she's going to make a very good presentation of this work. Yes, I'm totally sure about the quality. And so we will have a nice discussion afterwards. Thank you for coming.
Thanks to you for that. Thank you, Francisco, very much for inviting me here, for organizing all of this. Also for this very good presentation. I will try to do my best. Hopefully you will not be too much disappointed after all of these nice words. So as everyone said, this is a paper that I'm writing together with Jose, but also with Carmelo Reverte from Technical University of Cartagena. The title is What Money Cannot Buy, a New Approach to Measuring Venture Capital Non-Financial Value Added. So I understand that here the audience is a little bit mixed. So I don't know if you know what venture capital is, but I'll tell you. Venture capital is a source of entrepreneurial finance, so finance for startups. It's equity investment. But the peculiarity of venture capital is that it's not only equity, but the venture capitalists, when they invest in a startup, they also take part of the day-to-day management of the startup to some extent. So they also have this non-financial value added, right? However, it's a bit difficult to understand to what extent this non-financial value added actually has an impact on the performance of the company in their portfolios. Because it's just a very simple empirical question, right? Because there is ample evidence that companies that get venture capital perform better than companies that do not get venture capital. But from these results, to understand if this is linked with the non-financial value added of venture capital, it's just another type of problem. So the aim of this paper is to focus on the non-financial value added by venture capital. So all the coaching, the professionalization services, networking, and all these value-added services that venture capital bring to the portfolio startup, and try to understand to what extent these activities create any value, right? The title is What Money Cannot Buy. So basically, we want to understand if there is an effect beyond money, beyond the injection of financial resources, right? It's kind of a tricky thing. So the agenda for the paper is pretty standard. Let's keep it. It starts with a motivational relevance. So why is it tricky to understand whether the non-financial value added of venture capital has an impact on companies' performance? Because, well, it's not the only effect, right? So as I was saying, venture capital-backed companies, so companies that got investment from a venture capitalist, perform better than other companies. There is ample evidence about this. So they are more innovative, they are more efficient. MPC here. They grow more in terms of sales and employees, and so they just are better. They patent more. But this consequence, the fact that they perform better, so this effect, this overperformance of venture capital-backed companies, is the consequence of three different factors. The first factor is selection effect. So what does it mean? It means that venture capital does not invest randomly, right? Venture capitalists are sophisticated investors that only invest in the most promising companies. So there are plenty of companies that every day apply for a venture capital investment, but only few of them, like less than 1%, actually gets the financing. So there is kind of a first selection, which is very strong. So venture capitalists only invest in companies which have a good potential. Right? So then you see that venture capital-backed companies perform better than the others. Like, is it because of venture capital, or is it just because they are intrinsically better, right? Because they were selected. This is the first reason why companies that got venture capital perform better than the others. The second effect is like the treatment effect, okay? So the fact that venture capital also does something to the companies to make them better. And in particular, they do two things. They add financial value and non-financial value. So financial value is the fact that they are injecting financial resources, okay? We are talking about companies which are startups. Therefore, they are, by definition, financially constrained, okay? What does it mean? It means that for them it's very difficult to get the financial resources that they need to grow. We are going to talk about the reasons why this is so. So basically, they invest only if someone puts some resources in them, okay? So if no one invests in them, they basically cannot grow more than a threshold because they just don't have the financial resources. So think about this startup with a great idea but no financial resources to develop it. Once the venture capital invests, this idea finally can be developed and the company can flourish even without any non-financial value added from the venture capital. The third effect is that there's no financial value added. So the fact that beyond the financial resources, venture capitalists also coach the company, monitor the company, bring all the network that they have, all the knowledge of other companies in the area, or other potential investors, or other suppliers, or customers, or skilled employees that are in the area. So all of these things create some value, which money cannot buy. All right? So our mission is to isolate this third effect. Of course, the literature has been trying to tackle these three categories: selection effect, financial value added, and non-financial value added, previously in the literature, but they mainly focused on disentangling the selection and the value added effect. So most of the research is about, okay, venture capital-backed companies perform better, either because they were better from before or because venture capital adds value. Okay? So the focus is to disentangle these two effects, selection and value added. But then they don't really go into details about whether the value added is financial or non-financial, right? So usually what they do is to give a lot of attention to the selection part, and then just say, okay, for the financial part, financial value added, we just control for the amount of resources that I bought by venture capital. So venture capital that invests 1 million, we control 1 million. Venture capital that invests 10,000, 10,000. And then they say, after controlling for the amount invested, all the rest of the effect must be non-financial value added. But if you do this, basically you're assuming that the effect of financial value added is linear with the amount of resources invested, which is not necessarily the case. Probably it's not the case, right? So this approach, to our mind, in our opinion, is not the best. There are other papers which approach the problem from a different angle, if you want. So for instance, there is the paper from Croce and Jose and other authors. These authors, they look at TFP, so total factor productivity. So this is a measure of productivity, okay? So the relationship between inputs of the production function and outputs of the production function. If you look at the TFP, it's kind of meaningful because the TFP controls for the level of inputs, right? So if a venture capital brings a lot of resources, the TFP in theory should not be influenced so much by that, but it should be influenced by the extent to which the company is able to transform inputs in outputs. So they argue that an increase in TFP should be due to the non-financial value added of venture capital, which I think is true to some extent, but also one may say that if you have enough financial resources, you can improve your processes, right? You can adopt technologies which are better, and this will increase your efficiency even in absence of any non-financial value added. Are you with me so far, more or less? So that's an approach from Croce, but I think that something else can be done. And then there are other papers that instead tackle just the non-financial value added and try to demonstrate that it exists. There are some papers that do these things. There are many papers that just interview venture capitalists and they ask, so do you really manage the company? And they say yes. There are other papers that look at shocks in the non-financial value-added activities of the venture capitalists, and they see an increase in the performance of the companies. But this approach helps us in understanding that there is a non-financial value-added, but not in quantifying how big it is, or not in understanding how big it is with respect to the financial value-added. Okay. So what's the relevance, the relative importance of the two effects? This is what we try to do with our approach. So, what's our approach? Our approach is to basically use a counterfactual which is different with respect to the counterfactual that usually is used in these type of studies. So usually, to see the impact of venture capital, you compare companies that got venture capital with companies that did not get any venture capital. Then you see the difference between the two performances, and they say, okay, this is because of the venture capital effect. But if you do this, the effect of venture capital will be just the composition of the financial value added and non-financial value added, just some of the two. We want to isolate the non-financial value added. So what do? Instead of comparing venture capital-backed companies with companies that did not get venture capital, we compare them with companies that got something similar to venture capital. We compare them with companies that got a type of financing that is similar to venture capital but does not have any non-financial value added. Right? So basically we compare funding plus non-financial value added with just funding. So our idea is that the difference between these two treatment effects should be the non-financial part. What do we use as our treatment without any non-financial value added? We use participative loans. Okay? So these are loans, in our case, issued by the Spanish government, but it can be any other type of participative loan, which have some characteristics that make them pretty similar to a venture capital investment. We're going to talk about that. Okay? The idea is that participative loans are an injection of financial resources in companies that are financially constrained, exactly like venture capital. So the financial value added should be there also in these participative loans. But participative loans do not entail any monitoring or any activities after the funding. So that part is different with respect to venture capital, right? So we compare these two treatments and say and think that the difference between the two treatments should capture our non-financial value added. Right? So basically the estimator that we compute is called difference in difference in difference. We're going to talk about it. I know it's kind of a weird name. And we're going to use this estimator to answer two questions. First, to what extent do the financial value added and non-financial value added increase company performance in terms of growth? And then under which conditions are venture capitalists able to add non-financial value added? So is it something that every venture capitalist can do, or are there conditions under which this non-financial value added is stronger? Then of course we need to control for selection effects, because that's the third part of the study, and we do that with a matching algorithm and also with some more sophisticated things we're going to talk about. So literature review and theoretical background. So basically now I summarized everything, and now we're going to go more in details about all the steps. So the first point of our reasoning is that entrepreneurial ventures are financially constrained. So what does it mean? It means, so think about a startup. A startup doesn't have any track record, right? It doesn't have any collateral, doesn't have any asset, almost like an empty box in which there is only an idea, right? So if you go with this situation to a bank and you ask for a loan, the bank is going to tell you no, because you don't have any track record, so I cannot tell if you're going to be able to pay back your loans. You don't have any collateral. So even if I trust you on your word, I cannot really have anything that I can put my hands on in case the loan defaults. And also, you're a startup, so you're probably going to ask me for a very small loan. But I'm a bank, I'm going to do some due diligence for you before giving you the loan. And this due diligence has a fixed cost, which is disproportionately high with respect to the interest they're going to give me, because the loans that you're going to ask is pretty small, right? So for all of these reasons, it's very difficult to startups to go to commercial banks and just ask for loans. So equity capital is the type of financing which is considered to be more appropriate for startups. Okay? In the case of equity, there are several advantages. You don't need collateral to have equity. You basically don't have any payments to make in the very first years of your development. That's just, let's say, the return is a bit later in time. And there is no increase in the probability of financial distress. So there are several papers that say equity is the best financial option for startups. And most of these papers focus on venture capital. So venture capital is a provider of equity, right? These are investors that are able to overcome the information asymmetries surrounding startups. So even if a startup doesn't have any track record, if you don't know anything about it, the venture capitalists select startups as a job. So they have screening abilities that can go beyond this information opacity that surrounds the value of startups. And moreover, venture capitalists are very good in contracting. So they put down contracts that consider all the possible scenarios of the future development of the venture. So they kind of create a barrier between themselves and the risk linked with the startup. And also they monitor the company after the investment. So after the company receives the equity, they just don't go away, but they stay with the company to monitor it and make sure that the company is going in the right direction according to their beliefs. So for this reason, venture capital is a good financial option for startups. And in fact, there is ample empirical evidence showing that companies that get venture capital are afterwards less financially constrained. Okay? So after you get venture capital, you're actually able to invest closer to your optimal level. Okay? And also, as a consequence of this, the companies grow more. So they grow more in terms of employees, they grow more in terms of sales. Okay? So venture capital is relaxes financial constraints and allows company to grow in the future. We add to this picture participative loans. So participative loans are similar to venture capital to some extent. First of all, in participative loans, information asymmetries are managed by the screening. So participative loans are awarded after a detailed screening process, okay, by governmental agencies in this case, that again do this as a job. So they screen thousands of proposals and they pick the one that for them are the most, the ones with the highest potential. Moreover, they do contracts that manage the agency problems between the parties involved, right? So in the case of participative loans, the contract is a mix between equity and debt. So it's not a loan, but payments, the companies do not need to make the payments in the very first year. Payments are kind of delayed. And moreover, the payments depend on the performance. Okay? So if you're performing poorly, the payments that you need to make are minimal. If you're performing better, the payments that you need to make become bigger and bigger and bigger. Alright? So because of this, what's the equity nature of the participative loans, we argue that they are not that different from what venture capital does. Moreover, there is again empirical evidence supporting the fact that participative loans are a good financial option for startups. So first of all, there is a paper with me and that showing that, which is the one that I presented here 3 years ago. Many of you were there back then. We show in that paper that by getting a participative loan, a company becomes more attractive also for commercial banks. Okay? So if you get the participative loan, then it's easier to open a normal credit line with a normal commercial bank. And as a consequence of that, participative loans allow companies to grow. Again, another paper from Zen in which they show that companies that get participative loans grow more than companies that did not get it. So as you can see, that it's kind of a similar picture going on for venture capital and participative loans to some extent. And this leads us to our first hypothesis, which is entrepreneurial ventures receiving external finance, either in the form of venture capital or in the form of participative loan, grow more than companies that did not get any of those treatments. Okay? So if you get participative loan or if you get venture capital, you probably grow more with a similar company that did not get that type of treatment because of the relaxation of financial constraints. Alright? So the other part of the story is the non-financial value added. So this is the part that only stays there for venture capitalists, okay? We said that for participative loans, there is no ex post monitoring. So once you get the loan, that's it, right? For venture capitalists instead, there is monitoring. Venture capitalists sit in the board of directors of these companies, so they kind of manage the company to some extent, not on a daily basis, but they manage it to some extent. So the literature has been thinking and discussing about the non-financial value added of venture capitalists for quite a while. So they identified three main groups of non-financial value adding activities: the coaching function, the professionalization, so the fact that they change the management to make it more professional, so they replace the CEO, they have a network of people with business skills that are usually involved in the management of the startup. And then there is also a signaling effect. So if you get venture capital, it's also easier for you to get funding from other sources or to get better people in your team. So because of all of these, we think that venture capital has a non-financial value added. Since the non-financial value added is there only for venture capital and not for participatory loans, we expect that the effect on growth of venture capital is higher with respect to the effect of participatory loans. So, zero base, you have nothing. If you have participatory loans, you grow more. If you have venture capital, you grow more. But if you have venture capital, you grow more with respect to what you do if you only have participatory loans. And the difference between the two treatment effects is our non-financial value added. Alright? Our other hypotheses are on the moderators of this non-financial value added. So there are several, let's say, characteristics that may moderate the extent to which a venture capital is able to add non-financial value to the startup. In this case, we consider three of them: the capital under management, the experience that the venture capitalists have, and the number of companies per portfolio manager. So to make it short, because I'm already running out of time, if you are a bigger or more experienced venture capital, basically you have a bigger network, right? And you can exploit economies of scale. So because of this, you're better at managing your companies, you're better at adding non-financial value added. And the third idea is that you also need to give enough attention to your companies. So if you have a portfolio with a very big number of companies, clearly you cannot add the same amount of value to all of them, right? So if you have a high number of companies per portfolio manager, probably your ability to add non-financial value added will be smaller with respect to another venture capitalist that has a small number of portfolio companies per portfolio manager, right? So basically, the extent to which you are able to add non-financial value depends on the time and the attention that you can allocate to your portfolio companies, right? If you have a small number of portfolio companies per manager, this is easier. It's easier to manage the company. And if you have big portfolios per manager, the ability to add value is smaller, right? So these are the three moderators that we consider. And I think that we are able to move now to the empirical part. So the empirical part, I already discussed it a little bit in the introduction. Basically what we do is to compute a difference in difference estimator. So what are the three differences coming from? So first we need to compute two difference in difference estimators, right? So we compute the difference in difference estimator for venture capital and the one for participative loans. You should, I think all of you know what a difference in difference estimator is. Just take a performance measure. You compute the difference of that performance measures around a given moment. For instance, in our case, between the moment in which you receive venture capital and some years later, so a difference. Then you take another company that did not get the treatment, so a similar company that for some reason did not get venture capital, and you look at the same time horizon for the difference in performance. So you have a difference, a difference. Difference in difference is the difference between the two. So it's to what extent the performance of a company grows more if it has a treatment with respect to the case in which it doesn't have a treatment. So we compute it for venture capital, we compute it for participative loans, and then we compute the difference between the two differences. So the DDD, difference. These should capture, in our opinion, the non-financial value added of venture capital. I hope it's clear. So there is a super important assumption behind our reasoning, which is that financial value added of participative loans and financial value added of venture capitalists are similar, right? This is key. Okay, so let's discuss about it for a little while. In both cases, we are talking about hybrid of debt and equity. we said that participative loans are, wait, what did I do? Here, participative loans have these, are loans, but the interest have a component that depends on the performance. So they're not that different from equity. And if you think about venture capital, so far I've said it's an equity investment, but it's not really an equity investment. If you really go and look at the contracts of venture capitalists, you will see that it's actually a mix of straight equity, but also preferred equity, straight debt, convertible equity. So as you can see, venture capital is not just equity, but it's really something in between equity and debt. So for some reasons, they are not that different. They are both senior to straight equity, so in case of liquidation, you get this, as an investor, you get these cash flows before normal equity investors, shareholders. For this reason, rating agency would put both of these financial options in the equity basket. The duration of the investments is similar, 6 years on average for the venture capital, 4 to 9 years for the participating loans that we have in our case. The amount is slightly different. So for venture capitalists, the amount is going to be a bit bigger with respect to the amount of the participating loans. So the amount of money that you get. So it's 100 to 600K for venture capital, 35 to 300K for participating loans. So this is something which is different. That's why when we follow our methodology, we make sure that we select participative loans which are similar to venture capital injections, right? So starting from the assumption that venture capital and participative loans have a similar financial value added, we can compute the non-financial value added as a difference. So some details about the sample. I think this slide is really full, but just listen to what I say. We use the population of venture capital-backed companies and participative loan-backed companies, so companies that got a participative loan in Spain. So we look at all of them. We look at companies that got this funding between 2005 and 2013 when they were less than 10 years old. So we try to consider companies that are actually young. The source of our data is the What Capital RTS Group. Is it right? Basically, Jose is the owner of all those data. And then we also cross-check it with data that come from the providers of participative loans, ENISA and Invertech. We also have a massive control group of companies that did not get venture capital, did not get participative loans. We are talking about 20,000 companies. So it's kind of big. We start from this population and then we do a matching, okay? Because it's very important that all our companies in the sample are similar, or as similar as possible, okay? So the first thing that we do is to do our matching, a propensity score matching, to match these three groups of companies. So first we match venture capital-backed companies with participative loans-backed companies. So these two groups must be similar, okay? And in this case, we also match on the amount that they get, okay? So that we are sure that also the treatment effect more or less is similar. Then we do a second matching in which we match venture capital-backed companies with control group, so companies that did not get venture capital, and a third matching in which we match PL-backed companies with control group. Okay. So at the end we have four groups: venture capital and their matched peers, participative loans and their matched peers. All right? And all of these four groups of companies are similar with respect to observable variables. And by observable variables, I mean the industries, the regions in which they are, and then the age, the size, the cash, the intangible, the total factor productivity, and the amount. So we do some tests to test the balance of our matching, and it's fine, right? What about our econometric model? So we use a fixed effect model to model the growth of companies, and we consider three-dimensional growth in employees, in assets, and in sales. We use a fixed effect. The dependent variable is the logarithm of employees, assets, and sales. But since it's a fixed effect, what we are actually measuring is variations in this variable across time. So it's a panel. It's a panel data set. Our independent variable will capture the effects of venture capital, of participative loans, right? And then to also to also test our hypothesis on which venture capitalists are better able to add non-financial value added. We also split the venture capital dummy in small venture capitalists versus big venture capitalists, experienced versus unexperienced, or the ones that give more attention to their portfolio companies with respect to the ones that give less attention to their portfolio companies, right? So to understand which ones are bigger, which ones are more experienced, and which one allocate more attention to the portfolio companies, we look respectively at their capital under management, and the number of investments that they did so far, and at the number of companies per portfolio manager. So if you have more companies per portfolio manager, you will be a low attention venture capital. If you have, I don't know if you have a small number of companies per portfolio manager, you'll be a high attention venture capitalist. We will test our hypothesis by looking at the differences between the coefficients of some of these independent variables. So if you are a little bit confused, don't worry, because now we see a table in which everything will become more clear, maybe. So this is our main table of results. You're not supposed to read the numbers, so don't worry if you don't see them, but basically these are fixed effect regressions in which the dependent variable is written up here, so logarithm of employees, of total assets and sales, and we replicate the analysis twice, first without controlling for the amount invested, and then controlling for the amount invested. Alright? The first dependent variable that we have up there is participative loan. That is a dummy that goes from 0 to 1 when you get the participative loan. Right? As you can see, it has a positive coefficient, meaning that from when you get participative loan, your growth will increase. Okay? Your size will increase, therefore you will grow more. Venture capital, that's a dummy that goes from 0 to 1 in the year in which you get your venture capital. Again, positive and significant coefficient. Okay? So these two coefficients basically are telling us that our first hypothesis, that both participative loans back companies and venture capital back companies grow more with respect to companies that did not get any funding. The second hypothesis that we have is about the difference between these two coefficients. So in theory, if there is a non-financial value added, this should be captured by our DDD estimator, which is the difference between those two coefficients. So we compute the difference between the two coefficients. Well, it's this one, and we test whether it's positive, it's significant or not. I don't know if you can see it, but just look at the numbers here. For instance, here we have the effect of participative loans, which is 20%, and the one of venture capital, which is 29.5%. Meaning that the total effect of venture capital on employment growth is 29.5%. So they grow by 29.5%. But for participative loan, the effect is 20%. So it means that even if you don't get any non-financial value added, you grow anyway. Okay? So the effect of non-financial value added is just the difference between the two, in this case 9.5 percentage points. And then again for all the other variables. And we see that there are positive differences along all our dimensions. I want you to notice also this. Once we control for the amount, the effect of participative loans becomes insignificant. It kind of makes sense because participative loans are just the amount, right? It's just an injection of financial resources and not much more than that. So once you control for the amount, the effect of participative loans becomes less significant. Okay? Still, it doesn't matter. In our reasoning, the real non-financial value added is going to be the difference between the two coefficients. Okay? So for the moment, we find support for hypothesis 1 and 2. We then do a bunch of robustness checks. We control for syndication. We do a more proper difference model in which we compute the difference for venture capital and for PL debt in different samples using different control groups. So when we compute then the difference, it's a real DDD. So results are robust also to this change in the specification. Then we change a little bit the matching, but results are still there. The second big table I want to show you is instead the one which considers the moderators or the conditions under which venture capitalists are better able to add the non-financial value added. And in this case, we add a specification which control for venture capital which are big and the ones which are small, the ones which are experienced and the ones which are not experienced, the ones with a high attention policy and the one with a low attention policy. And it's pretty interesting to see that the ones which are bigger, more experienced, and that give more attention to their portfolio companies are the ones actually providing non-financial value added, while the others have coefficients which are less significant or maybe not significant at all. Okay? So we test our hypothesis on the drivers of the non-financial value added by considering the difference between the coefficient of the big, experienced, attentive venture capitalist with respect to the participative loans. Again, we find positive and significant differences, meaning that these are drivers of non-financial value added. So far so good, but if you send this paper to a journal as it is, you would be rejected because venture capital is an endogenous treatment. What does it mean? It means, well, we said it already, right? Venture capitalists invest in companies which are intrinsically better, okay? And they are intrinsically better for some characteristics that are not observable to the researchers. Us. Okay, so venture capitalists select companies based on the feeling that they have when they talk with these people, or the business plan, or some market potential, all of which are not observable to us. So even if we did a propensity score matching, we matched on observable variables, but we could not do it for the unobservable variables, right? So this means that we need to do another robustness check, in which we consider the endogeneity of the venture capital treatment. And for similar reasons, participative loans are also endogenous, because they are also provided after a screening of the business proposal. Okay? So it's also not a non-random process, which is not based only on observable variables. So for this reason, we use a Witching regression with endogenous Witching, which is a very fancy name, but the idea is to basically take in consideration the selection effect using an Ekman process, more or less, and then estimating the growth of companies, netting the selection away. And when you estimate the growth of companies, then you can predict the growth of companies, and you can compare the predicted growth with the real growth, and see what's the difference between the two. So let's go step by step. The first step of the model is to model the probability of each company to receive either participative loan or venture capital. So in this case, since we have two treatments, we use a bivariate probability, okay, which you have participative loan and venture capital as dependent variables. These two processes are not independent. That's why we need to use a bivariate probability and model the two processes simultaneously. Right? In this case, we also need an instrumental variable, because this will make our ability to predict the probability of receiving PL, participative loans of venture capital, much better. As an instrument, as instruments, we use the fundraising for venture capital. So we are only looking at Spanish companies, so we look at the fundraising in every single region of Spain. If you are located in a region in which there is a higher fundraising, so venture capital is more developed, in short, your probability of receiving venture capital is higher. But this has nothing to do with your performance in terms of growth. So for this reason, we think that this is a valid instrument. For the NISA, we use something which is similar, which is the investments that the NISA made in every single region. So again, if you are located in a region in which NISA invested more, your probability to receive the treatment is higher, but your growth is not necessarily higher. Again, for this reason, it can be used as an instrument. So let me show you what happens. This is the by-product model. These are the two dependent variables. These are all our explanatory variables, including the instruments. Instruments are positive and significant. We use this model to compute some investment ratios. right? Which are construct that kind of takes in consideration the selection process, also based on non-assessable variables. Once we compute the inverse mix ratio, what we do is to plug them in some growth models. So here we are modeling the growth of venture-backed companies and PL-backed companies separately. Okay, so the dependent variable is the growth in the next 3 years after the funding. We do it for venture capitalists, we do it for participative loans, controlling for the selection through the investment ratio. We do this, we see that the investment ratio is, for instance, significant only in this model here of sales. What does it mean? It means that there are some unobservable variables, unobservable factors that influence at the same time the probability that a company receives venture capital and the growth in the midterm, in the 3 years after the funding. So this is a proof that actually venture capital is an endogenous treatment. But with this methodology, in theory, we are getting rid of that heterogeneity. Then we use this table to predict the growth of companies. But here we do something a little bit weird. So we use the model of the growth of venture-backed companies to estimate the what-if growth of PL-backed companies. So we use this model to estimate the growth that PL-backed companies would have had if they were VC-backed. So basically, we use the coefficients of the VC-backed model and the X, the independent variable of the PL-backed, to predict the growth that these companies would have had if they were VC-backed. And we do the other way around. So we use the coefficients of the PL-backed companies and we apply them to the characteristics of the VC-backed companies to estimate the growth that VC-backed companies would have had if they were PL-backed. So once we do this, we basically have two measures of growth for every single company. We have the growth that the company actually had, and you have the growth that the company would have had if it fell in the other category. If PL-backed were VC-backed and if VC-backed were PL-backed. Okay? By comparing these two measures of growth, we actually can say something about the treatment effect of venture capital or the treatment effect of participative loans. And this is the output of the final analysis. I promise this is the last table that I show you. So this is the employees' growth. Look at that. This is the growth that VC-backed companies had, and this is the one that they would have had if they were PL-backed. So 0.81 with respect to 69. So if VC-backed companies were PL-backed, they would have grown less, like 12.3 percentage points. For total asset growth, it's negative, minus 23.4. For sales growth, minus 33.2. So if VC-backed companies were PL-backed, they would have grown less. It's good. We also find another kind of puzzling result. If we compare PL-backed companies' growth with the growth that they would have had if they were VC-backed, in theory we should expect a higher growth, right? If you have PL-backed companies and then you give no financial value added, in theory it should grow more. But we don't find that. So this is a bit puzzling. We are still working on this. If you have any ideas about why this should be, please tell us. From my intuition, the fact is that these companies, the PL-backed companies, are not as good at the VC-backed. So even if you add the treatment, these companies just don't grow enough. So this is because the selection process of venture capital and the selection process of participative loans are different, done by different people with different experiences. So that may be one reason why. But that's almost. Am I good with time?
Yeah, perfect. 5 more minutes if you want.
Well, we'll just have a couple of slides more. Okay, there was another table. I forgot about it. So this is just a summary of the results. Basically, what we find is that both participative loans and venture capital improve the growth of companies, but the venture capital improve the growth of companies more. And we say that this is because of the non-financial value added of venture capital. In terms of numbers, we find, we produce this table, which is kind of, I think, the real contribution of the paper. Basically, we tell, there is a lot of literature that tells you that venture capital improves the growth, for instance, in terms of employees. Now we show that 32% of that increase in growth is due to the non-financial value added. The rest of it is due to the financial value added. So this methodology helps us to really quantify the financial and non-financial value added contributions to growth. So the effect on non-financial value added on employment is 32% of the total effect. And the effect on non-financial value added on assets is 41% on the total effect of venture capital. And for sales, the effect on non-financial value added is 57% of the total effect of venture capital. And I'm pretty happy with these numbers because they actually make sense. The effect of venture capital shows is stronger. The effect of the non-financial value added of venture capital is stronger on sales. So this is because the venture capital will help you to reach new clients or to improve your marketing, promotion, distribution, all of these things. While in terms of employment and assets, probably there is less room to actually add non-financial value there. We also show that there are at least 3 relevant determinants of the abilities of venture capitalists to add non-financial value. And we consider the capital under management, the experience that they have, and the number of companies overseen per VC manager. Which means that actually venture capitalists can add non-financial value, but it's not automatic. They can do it only if they are big enough, they are experienced enough, or if they allocate enough attention to their portfolio companies. So we think that these results have implications for everyone, for venture capitalists, because for instance, they understand that allocating enough experience to their portfolio companies is really key to actually boost performance. Also to policymakers, because we show that venture capitalists add some non-financial value added. Well, add some non-financial value. So it makes sense for policymakers to continue to try to develop the venture capital industry, especially in Europe, which is something that I've been trying to do in the last 20 years, and we should continue to do so. And then it also has some implications for companies that are looking for venture capitalists. When you apply for venture capital now, you should know that you should also consider these type of things. What is the policy of the venture capitalist? Is it going to give you enough attention, or are you just one in a portfolio of 200 companies? Of course, this study has some limitation. The first limitation is, well, don't take me wrong, but we do all of this in Spain, which is it's kind of a good aspect because, well, first because of the great quality of the data that we have, and also because the venture capital market is pretty developed in Europe with respect to other countries. But of course, it would be better to extend this methodology to a broader international sample and basically show that this methodology to disentangle the non-financial value added and financial value added can be applied elsewhere. So for doing that, we basically will need something which is to some extent similar to venture capital in terms of financial value added, but different in terms of non-financial value added. So we will need something like that across many European countries. And then other limitations or future developments of this paper. The first one would be to consider more moderators of the non-financial value ability of venture capital. So now we use size, experience, and attention, and we use more. We use distance, we could use network centrality, or we could use, I don't know, let's say, put there the human capital available, the affiliation, and so on. So venture capitalists are defined across many, many dimensions. So it would be interesting to see more of these dimensions, including governance as well. And then another thing that one can do would be to consider not only the moderators at the venture capital firm level, but also the ones at company level. So are some companies more affected by the non-financial value added with respect to others? For instance, if you have a company without any managerial skill, maybe it would be better affected by the non-financial value added. If you have a company with founders which have an MBA, maybe the effect of the non-financial value added of venture capital maybe smaller. Well, this is still a working paper. We are almost ready to submit, but we would be very grateful if you had any comment on this, on how to improve on this paper, or of course also any question. This is my email address in case you want to contact me more in general. Otherwise, thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you very much. It is very nice that you asked for comments because you are ready for that because Gustavo prepared some comments for you. So please, Gustavo.
Well, first of all, I'd like to congratulate you because it's been because it's been a very good work. And when they were sent to me, I said, how interesting, because it's something that I've been working with venture capital, and you see things, but you don't know why. And now I know why. That's helpful. Okay, just to point out some of the things, so you have already said everything in the explanation. The main contribution of this paper, I think, is to find out this differential non-financial value add. I think that was in the cloud, and now it's on the ground. Okay? The way of measuring, it's very interesting too, because you have separated all the possible factors that were visible, and you have handled the investigation very well. Okay? Peer literature, as far as I have been able to see, it was like that. They said, okay, venture capital performs better, but there are no differentiation because of the money or the non-financial value added. Okay. So I think this attempt to separate the effects has been very successful. Thanks to the database, Orbis and Web Capital Research, I think it's crucial. I'm working on that, not in that same, but in my work is very important to have such databases because all the difficulties to make all the matching with companies and all that, if the database is not good, I think you have selected very good databases for that. So that's a good point. And after that, I would like to point out your tricks, okay? I mean, the way you have solved all the problems to find a way to group what you wanted to show. I mean, matching the venture capital with the P&L, profit participative loans, taken companies in groups, and after that, doing all the consideration about the algorithm with the relevance variables that affect not also sales and growth and employment and that, but also for the selection of a venture capital or an entity that is going to provide PL loans, so profit. Try, let me use to say PPL. I get lost. PL, okay? Age, sales, cash, total factor productivity, assets. I think that's been a very good selection too, because it's what I have seen. It's true. So when I saw that you were using them, I was making this connection with the cloud I had in my mind to the ground on the floor. So that's been a good thing, and I have learned a lot because I have learned how to use the DD and the DD and D difference. So it's very interesting because I think that was the point to show, at least with the sample that you have, Spanish companies in this period of time and all that, to show how much influence has this non-financial value added. I don't want to extend more because I think you've done a very good presentation explaining all the things, and I wanted to ask you some more questions. That's something. When you choose 3 years for the age of the company, why 10 years? That's one of the points. Okay? Do you want me to?
Oh yeah, immediately.
And if you,
so maybe you will forget about it first.
So yes. If we use different age of companies, you think it could be different. Not also because of the period of time, because it's a period in Spain that is very special, let's say that, okay? But also because of the age of the companies. Okay? That is one of the questions. In the number, another question about years. In the number of years for the difference of logarithms of sales, employees, and all that, you use 3 years. Okay, that's another question. Why 3 and not 4, or something like that? Because motivation period, I don't know if it could be exactly the same, or what information could you have about different sectors, different industries with this maturation period. And the third one will be based in your results. You have the conclusions based in total group of companies, and you consider that it would be interesting to apply another characteristics. Okay. Do you think would it be the results in percentage of growth and the conclusions differ changing sectors or in different sectors? You have made a sample, a very good sample, okay, with a mix. But if we separate the sectors, would be a deviation from the results big enough or significant enough? And now my question is my personal one, coming from the cloud again to the ground. I have seen how they work. Okay, they provide this non-financial value added in two main ways. Let's say screening the team in the company, as you have said, do they have MBA or whatever, or just as reading a book, they go there and change the team just for the first time without doing anything. Do you think it could be another way of interpreting the results? It could be because there are some venture capital firms that do it in a way and the other ones do it in another way. And I don't know the reason. It's another in the cloud. But it's just my personal question. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the appreciation of the work. I'm really happy that it actually makes sense for a person that is in the business. So I'm super glad that you appreciated it. Regarding your questions, some of them are tricky. So why 10 years? So we define in our sample, our companies received venture capital when they were most 10 years old. So the distribution of the age across this dimension is actually super skewed. So there you have many companies that got it very earlier, and then the number of companies that got it late is smaller and smaller. We stopped at 10 because we wanted so first because I wanted a number of companies which was big enough. We didn't want to discard too many companies. And second, because participative loans are not always granted only to SMEs. So, only to startups. They are granted to SMEs, but not necessarily always to startups. So by basically capping more than the companies that we cap, so taking companies which are younger than, for instance, 5 years old, we would lose many participative loans. But I totally agree with you. It's probably using different samples with different ages, we will get different results in terms of contribution to the non-financial value added. Probably the contribution to the non-financial value added is higher in companies which are smaller, younger, instead of companies which are more established, that they already have their management going on and so on. So it would be an interesting addition, I think, to replicate the analysis just on companies that are younger than 5 years and see if results are still there, if they're bigger or if they are smaller. The paper is super long already as it is, but I'm sure that we can work it out and put it in a robust set of topics. So thank you very much for this comment. It really makes sense. For the 3-year special, foresee the growth in the long term. We thought the 3 years was a good balance between, well, it was not too short, so it was too short we will not see any impact of venture capital, but it was not too long because well, after 4 years that you get venture capital, you don't know if you're looking at the effect of venture capital or something else. But it's also true that the holding period for venture capital is often longer than 3 years. So one could also use 4 or 5 or even 6 years. We could do that. The sample would shrink more and more and more and more because some of the investments were done in 2013, so we don't have 6 years of observations after that. But it could work. And also, I agree with you that the time frame should be different in different industries. If you invest in biotech, probably the time frame is longer with respect to a company that works in software or something like that. So it's also a good point. We need to think about it. And in general, probably it's also true that the percentage of non-financial value added would be different in different sectors. It would also be different depending on the sector specialization of the venture capitalists. There are some venture capitalists that are specialized in a given industry, biotech, and then probably they add more value to biotech companies, and there are venture capitalists which are generalists, and they would probably add less value. So regarding that, I don't know how we can manage. Maybe we can estimate to some extent the specialization of venture capitalists using their history. It could be done.
Not much specialization in Spain because
Yeah.
the size of the market is small.
Right.
And regarding the other question, the 3 years is because my previous knowledge, the added value, both financial and non-financial, increases until year 3 and then starts not decreasing, but not increasing at the same time. So the more you delay that, the more, no, it's not only a question of reducing sample size, but also reducing how the impact, how you want to test the impact and check the impact on the PhD terms. So it's 3 years is the optimum. And therefore, the additional growth starts decreasing.
Get off.
No, because the investment shock is gone. The investment shock is in year 0, and then the investment shock has an effect, it's less, in my experience, from my experience in 3 years. And then from that moment on, in relative terms, the growth is different. It's not as high as the beginning years. So there's growth in absolute terms, but not that much in growth.
And then regarding your last point, so what is the driver of this no financial value added? Is it just because the venture capitalists are changing the leading team? I don't think this is part of the answer. Maybe it's part of the answer, but I don't think it's the bulk of it, because otherwise you would not see that the effect is stronger for venture capitalists that have smaller portfolios, right, per manager. You just see that some of them do it, the ones that change the management team, and some others don't. But this is not necessarily related to their experience or their size or number of or the number of portfolio firms per manager. Also, it's a bit complicated to see what the venture capitalists actually do. The sample which is big. I know there are some papers that are being developed right now in which, for instance, like Professor Colombo, in which they look at what venture capitalists do to the existing team, and they show that sometimes it's not really just changing the team or changing the CEO. That's of course part of the story, but sometimes it's also just improving on what they have. So improving the ability of the existing team, making them take some MBA courses or coaching them in terms of managerial skills. So it can be anything. But I think that what we capture is the sum of all of it, and it's not just substitution of the team. I think it's more than that. Thank you very much for the comments.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I'd say more academic question than professional. We do not have as much knowledge as you have, of course, but my question is, you said on your regression on PL companies and VC-backed companies, yes, that there was no difference if PL companies were financed, yeah, by VC investors. So, yes, how can you demonstrate that the less production that VC companies would have on the model is on because of the non-financial ways, or I mean, how can you demonstrate that if PL companies were VC backed would not have different results? How can you say
so
that?
So you're saying, how do I reconcile the two results?
Sorry?
How do you?
Yeah. How can
the
you
two
say
results
that
coexist?
There isn't anything in the model that would have higher results for VC companies? If that makes sense.
So, if I got you right, you are saying how comes that this is how comes that this is significant if this is not significant?
I mean, yes, but why isn't the model like undervalued for VC companies and
The model is undervalued for
I
VC
mean-
companies.
is it possible that adding new variables, the VC companies would have higher values if with a PL based?
So it may be that we are not modeling the selection right.
It's just
So-
again more academic than more to know the results than the question.
Because I don't know if I got you
Okay.
right. So I think that you're asking.
How can you state that there aren't variables in the VC model that are undervaluing the companies?
They're valuing the company?
I don't know.
What's that?
Underperformance.
Yes, that.
No, he's
We
I
have this
think it's, I think what you said is that maybe you are missing some variable of explain why the VC group, if it was included as under the would receive particular law, they would increase the growth by a larger amount so that you have a significant coefficient also in the other group.
Also in the other group. It could be.
But
It could be. What I'm about to say, it may as well be, because if you look, for instance, at the R squared of the two models, so model of growth for VC-backed and for PL-backed, the model of growth for the VC-backed has a higher explanatory power. So I don't know if it's due to the number of observations or if it's due to the fact that our regressors are more, are stronger, but it may be part of the story. So it may be that our models do not actually, so could be improved in terms of explanatory power and therefore in their power to predict the what-if growth, of companies that got VC but that got instead. I don't know if you have any suggestion on how to make that model better.
No. It was just a question. I couldn't understand that process. What if, I mean, if PL-backed companies were VC-backed, they would not have significant differences.
Yeah.
That was just.
It may be that some of the drivers for actually this is a kind of a good point, because maybe we should consider also the drivers of non-financial value added when modeling the growth of those companies. I don't know if we can do that, because the process with which venture capital add value is something which is also unobservable, which is also probably not just a linear combination of the variables that we have in our model. But then I wouldn't know how to make it better. We would need some variables which we basically don't have, such as or the possible drivers of venture capital's ability to add non-financial value. So in theory, this should not be different. If this is significant, the other ones should be significant too. If it's not significant, it may be that our explanatory model, the model that we use to predict this growth, is not good enough. But I think it's not good enough because the way in which venture capital add value cannot be modeled, basically. Because you cannot observe that. Maybe you will need information about the human capital of the startup. Maybe that. We don't have that.
But there's a selection issue, because the rejection rate in venture capital is 97%, whereas the rejection rate in particular is 50%.
Right.
So that's a difference.
Yeah.
Even though in both cases there's selection, competitive selection, the rejection rate is totally different.
Yeah.
The public natural funding also.
Yes, but there is a selection. There's a selection, and they, since they screen thousands of applications, they at the end of the day have a clear view what is good for a given industry, and so they have a clear view what is going on in every industry. So they even though there is not as selective as venture capital, they have their own view about the innovation framework.
Maybe these companies, even if they got the venture capital treatment, they would just not overperform because they are not as good as the VC backed companies per se.
So
they're already growing a little bit because of the funding effect. And even if you add the non-funding effect, since the companies are not good per se, you would not see any additional growth.
So the VC non-financial profit is just made for some companies ready for it? Is that what?
Maybe part of the start. Yes. So, which leads to the fact that we need to understand this and also look at the company level characteristics that moderate venture capital ability to add value. Maybe if we split these on startups with respect to companies which are more established, we will see an effect for startups and not for companies which are more established. Or if we split companies with a higher human capital with respect to a lower human capital, we see differences, or presence of patents or anything else. But yeah.
The venture capital is something in addition to that, because selection is based on three things: management, and management.
And you cannot mesh with
And in the case of Elisa, it's not management, it's business plan and the project is plan.
Yeah.
So I think that's the difference.
Yeah, but we probably should discuss more about its results with people, because at the moment we just don't really mention it that much. So thank you for the comment.
More questions, comments?
Be shy.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
That's opportunity?
maybe a methodological,
Yes.
many of us are struggling with similar efforts, not as huge as yours, but what were your, I know you are experienced and some of us are really doing that for the first time. In practice, if you had to give us an advice on what we should be careful in doing DDD, is there something that we need to pay some particular attention as newcomers?
Well, the point of the DDD is that everything else should be the same, right? Which is something with which I struggle and everyone already struggle. So for the DDD, you need, in theory, the cleanest way in which you can do the DDD, you need 4 groups, not 3. So you need, well, it depends on what's the aim, of course, of the DDD. If it's to compare the effect of 2 treatment effects, you should have ideally 4 groups of companies which are identical, the same company, but some of them got treatment A, some of them got treatment B, and the other 2 groups did not get anything. So the key of all of this is to have contrafactors which are as close as possible to the treated companies. And the other thing is that also the treated companies should be very similar. Once you have that, methodologically it's pretty simple. You just compute the impact of the 2 treatments with respect to their own control group, and you compute the difference between the 2. The cleanest way to do it is what we do in the robustness check, which is modeling separately, computing separately the DD, the difference from one treatment and difference from the other treatment, using 2 different control groups. And only then computing the difference between the 2 DD. The fact that is that once you do it, it's a bit tricky because if you estimate the effect of the 2 treatments separately, it means that you estimate it with 2 different models based on 2 different samples. And then you need to compute the difference between 2 coefficients that come from 2 different models based on 2 different samples. So you can do it, but you need to bootstrap. So you basically need to do replications to estimate a standard error for the coefficient. And based on the coefficients basically for the difference between the 2 coefficients. And based on that standard error, you see if it's significant or not significant. This is the cleanest way, which we do in the process check. Then we can do the kind of bit less dirty version, which is put everything in the same regression and estimate the 2 coefficients of the 2 treatments, and then just easily compute the difference between the 2 coefficients estimated in the same model.
I'm not an expert on these, by the way.
And then of course there are some papers which are mentioned in this paper that really talk about the methodology with much more precision than this.
Time for some more questions if you want. No more questions? Okay, so thank you very much for
Thanks to
your
you.
presentation.
Thanks to everyone.